talk about the beautiful business of milk today. Yeah, yeah. I got milk. Let's talk about milk. Oh yeah, baby, let's talk about the beautiful business of milk today.
This episode of Got Milk is sponsored by Shunya Agritech, the folks revolutionizing cattle nutrition with hydroponic green fodder. Visit their website at shunya.live for more details or download the Shunya app from Play Store or App Store.
Hey deep divers, ready for another deep dive? Today we're heading all the way to Manipur, India. It's in the eastern Himalayas, and we're going to be looking at something that I think you'll find really interesting. How dairy farmers there manage to feed their cows.
And this is especially interesting because Manipur is known for its hills and forests. Not exactly rolling fields of corn or alfalfa, right?
Right. There's limited land for growing fodder.
Yeah.
So how do they make it work? Well, we've got some academic research that's going to help us answer that question.
Yeah.
And trust me, there are some really clever strategies at play.
Before we get into the specifics of Manipur, though, I think it's important to set the stage a bit. India is actually the world's largest milk producer.
Whoa, that's a lot of milk.
It is. And it means there are a lot of cows that need a steady supply of food.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about fodder in India, we're talking about feeding a huge mutual portion of the world's dairy cows.
Exactly. And when you think about it that way, it makes the whole question of fodder management even more important, especially when you consider that across all of India, only about 49 million hectares of land are dedicated to growing fodder crops.
49 million hectares. That doesn't seem like a lot for a country as big as India.
It's not. And to make things even more complex, that land is spread out across 21 different agroecological zones.
Agroecological zones. Now that's a mouthful. What does that even mean?
Basically, it means areas with similar climates, soil types, and water resources. So the kind of fodder crops that thrive in one zone might not do well in another.
Ah, I see. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to growing fodder in India.
Nope. Farmers have to adapt to their local environment, and that's a big part of what makes Manipur's story so interesting.
Okay, so let's zoom in on Manipur. Like we said, it's a hilly forested state.
Yeah.
Not exactly ideal for large-scale agriculture, right?
Not in the traditional sense. But the research points out that most dairy farmers in Manipur rely on something called common property resources for their fodder.
Common property resources. Now that sounds intriguing. What are we talking about here?
Basically, land that's available for everyone to use. In this case, it's pastures, wastelands, and even forests.
Wow. So the cows in Manipur are basically grazing on a giant natural buffet.
That's one way to put it. And the way they manage this natural buffet is closely tied to the seasons.
Okay, I'm sensing a story here. Tell me more.
Well, during the summer, the cows can pretty much graze freely on all this common land.
Sounds idyllic.
It is. But then monsoon season hits with its torrential rains and access becomes more limited.
Ah, so that's where things get tricky.
Exactly. And that's when the farmers turn to other sources of fodder, mainly rice straw, which is a byproduct of rice harvesting, and various types of tree leaves.
Hold-on tree leaves?
Yep. They've figured out which tree leaves are safe and nutritious for their cows.
Like which ones?
The study mentions bamboo, pipal, subbable, even banana leaves. It's really quite fascinating.
It's like they have this ancient wisdom about the plants in their environment.
It is. They've turned what some might see as limitations into opportunities.
That's some serious ingenuity. I'm impressed.
Me too. But it's not without its challenges.
Right. The research did mention something about concentrate feed and limited access to it. What's the deal with that?
Ah, yes, concentrate feed. It's basically feed that's high in nutrients, like grains and protein supplements. It gives the cows an extra boost, especially for milk production. Kind of like a protein shake for humans.
Okay, I get it. But I'm guessing it's not easy to come by in Manipur.
You got it. They often have to import it from Assam, a neighboring state, which adds to the cost.
That makes sense. It's like trying to eat healthy on a budget. It's not always easy.
Exactly. And then there's this other thing that really surprised me from the research. It turns out only about 20% of the farmers in Manipur practice chaffing their fodder.
Chafing? Is that some kind of special cow massage technique?
Not quite. It just means chopping the fodder into smaller pieces before feeding it to the cows.
Seems simple enough.
It is, but it actually makes a big difference in how well the cows can digest the food and get the most nutrients out of it.
So something as basic as chopping up the fodder can affect how much milk the cows produce.
Absolutely. It's all about maximizing efficiency,
Right.
getting the most bang for your buck when it comes to feeding the cows.
This is fascinating stuff. We've covered so much ground already.
Yeah.
Agroecological zones, common property resources, seasonal fodder strategies, and now chafing. It really shows how much goes into feeding cows.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much more to unpack about how these farmers manage their resources, the specific challenges they face, and even some potential solutions that could help them thrive.
Well, then I say we keep diving in.
Yeah.
This deep dive is definitely exceeding my expectations.
Mine too. The ingenuity and resilience of these farmers is truly inspiring.
I'm already hooked. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back for more. Stay tuned, deep divers.
It's amazing, what we can learn from just taking a closer look at how people do things in different parts of the world. Like these farmers in Manipur.
It really is. I mean, it's such a reminder that sometimes the most innovative solutions aren't high-tech at all, you know? It's about working with what you have.
Exactly, adapting to your circumstances.
Yeah.
And these farmers, they've clearly got that down pat.
For sure. So we've been talking about this mix of grazing on common lands and using rice straw and tree leaves as fodder. But I'm curious about the nutritional value of these different sources. Are they all created equal?
That's a great question. And actually, the research touches on that a bit. It turns out that while things like rice straw are really readily available, especially after harvest season, they're not exactly the most nutrient-rich option. It's kind of like, if you ate plain rice every day, you'd fill up, but you'd be missing out on some important nutrients.
Right. So the tree leaves are more like the greens in the cow's diet,
Yeah.
providing a wider range of vitamins and minerals.
Exactly. They add variety. And that's key for the cow's health and milk production. Plus, all those different tree species being used as fodder, it actually helps maintain local biodiversity.
Wow. So it's a win-win for the cows and the ecosystem.
It really is.
Yeah.
But then we have the issue of concentrate feed, the stuff that's packed with nutrients, especially important for milk production. But like we talked about, it's not always easy to access in a place like Manipur.
Yeah. It has to be transported from another state, which means added costs.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting because there's this new solution emerging in India that could really change the game, even for remote areas like Manipur.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Have you ever heard of hydroponic fodder systems?
Hydroponics, like growing plants in water without soil. I've heard of it for vegetables, but for fodder, that's a new one.
It is. And it's gaining traction in India as a way to produce really high-quality, nutrient-rich fodder in a controlled environment. It's like an indoor farm, but instead of rows of lettuce, it's trays of sprouted grains and grasses, specifically for livestock.
Whoa. So they're growing cow food indoors. No land needed. That sounds almost futuristic.
It does sound a bit sci-fi, but it's becoming a reality, and it addresses a lot of the challenges we've been talking about. For one thing, hydroponic systems use way less water than traditional farming, which is huge in areas facing water scarcity.
And since it's all indoors, you're not at the mercy of the seasons or the weather.
Right. You can produce fresh green fodder all year round. And because the growing conditions are so controlled, you can actually boost the nutritional content of the fodder. It's like giving the cows a supercharged meal.
This is amazing. So how does this hydroponic fodder actually get to the cows? Do the farmers have to set up these elaborate systems on their own farms?
That's where things get even more innovative. There are companies in India like Shunya Agritech that are doing fodder as a service.
Fodder as a service. Now, that's a term I haven't heard before. What does that entail?
They set up these hydroponic units near farms, and then they deliver the fresh fodder directly to the farmers on a regular basis.
So it's like a milk delivery service, but for cow food.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
It is. It takes a lot of the pressure off the farmers. They don't have to invest in the equipment or worry about all the technical stuff. They can just focus on taking care of their animals and producing great milk.
I can see how this would be a game changer for farmers in Manipur, especially those who are struggling to afford that concentrate feed.
Yeah, it could really make a difference. And not just for the farmers, but for the whole dairy industry in the region.
This deep dive has been full of surprises. We started out looking at how farmers in Manipur adapt to their environment, and now we're talking about hydroponics and the future of fodder production.
It's a perfect example of how looking at a specific situation can open up a whole world of ideas and innovations. And it just goes to show that solutions can come from the most unexpected places.
So while the farmers of Manipur have been relying on traditional knowledge for generations, it seems like there's a whole new set of possibilities opening up for them now.
It's really exciting to think about how these new technologies might work alongside those traditional practices, To create a more sustainable and resilient dairy industry, it makes you wonder what the future holds for them.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like we started out talking about what cows eat, and now we're talking about like the future of food production.
Right. It all started with this one question about how dairy farmers in Manipur, India, managed to feed their cows, given the limited land they have for growing fodder. And look where we ended up.
It's been quite a journey from traditional practices to high-tech hydroponics. Who knew fodder could be so fascinating?
It's a testament to how interconnected everything is. You start digging into one specific thing,
Right.
and it leads you to all these other amazing discoveries.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the big question is, what does all this mean for the future of dairy farming in a place like Manipur? Right.
That's a good question. Well, I think the farmers of Manipur have already shown us that they're incredibly resourceful and adaptable. They've been making it work for generations,
Okay.
using what they have and adapting to the seasons.
Right. They've got this deep knowledge of their environment and how to use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
But we also saw that there are some limitations to those traditional practices, like getting access to that nutrient-rich concentrate feed.
Yeah, that's a big one. And that's where these new innovations like hydroponics could really make a difference. Being able to grow high quality fodder year round, regardless of the weather or the availability of land, it's a game changer.
Especially with that fodder as a service model.
Yeah.
Makes it so much more accessible for farmers.
Exactly. It
Right.
takes away a lot of the barriers and lets them focus on taking care of their animals. But it's not just about technology. It's about empowering farmers with knowledge and resources.
Right? Like you mentioned earlier, only a small percentage of farmers in Manipur actually chaff their fodder, which is something that can really improve how well the cows digest their food. So education and training are crucial too.
Absolutely. Giving farmers the tools and the knowledge to optimize their practices, whether it's something as simple as chaffing or adopting a whole new technology like hydroponics, that's how you create real change.
So it sounds like the future of dairy farming in Manipur and maybe even in India as a whole is about finding that balance between tradition and innovation.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's about taking the best of both worlds and creating a more sustainable and resilient system.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to all the complexities of food production and to the ingenuity of farmers all over the world. I don't think I'll ever look at a glass of milk the same way again.
Me neither. It's a good reminder that there's a story behind everything we eat, A story of hard work and innovation, and who knows what other fascinating stories are out there just waiting to be discovered.
That's a great point to end on. So to all our listeners out there, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep exploring the world around you. Till next time, deep divers out.